What's cracking, guys? Bruce Madison here, your host show of Metric Scout Fantasy Football. And April ADP is dropped at dynastyleaguefootball.com. We've been conducting mock drafts. There should be more coming out. And it's a good time for you to get a subscription. Go over there, check out all the information and tools. Every time the ADP drops, I like to look for values, talk about it on my channel, and let you know what running backs maybe you should buy according to average draft position. I try to do this monthly, and really I think this is a good tool, a good exercise for us to do just to see who's rising, who's falling, and just try and generate some ideas of who to pick up in our dynasty leagues. Are these running backs that we want to buy into, or are they just cheaper speculative assets that we may be able to pick up here and there? But let's take a look at 5 running backs that we can get in our dynasty fantasy football leagues. Let's start things off with our first running back here. He's being valued as RB49 with an ADP of 204. He's going into 200 range. He's a backup, but when the starter's out or when he's getting more opportunities, he could produce. Could be like an RB6, RB7, RB5-ish, somewhere in that range on your roster. It's Darrell Henderson, running back of the Rams. 7 double-digit PPR fantasy performances last year. Cam Akers is there. Everybody loves Cam Akers. He is funneled up there in value and ADP. I get it. It's the Cam Akers show. I love him too, but I can't ignore this value as well. Even if you have Akers, this might be a good opportunity to pick up his handcuff at a cheap price point. This is very cheap. You're getting him for free almost, and you just see what happens. He's just sitting there in the back in your roster, and you use him if you need him, or use him if he starts popping off or getting opportunity, but he's there, and you're getting him around the 200 mark in drafts, and this is a good price point. There's not much for him to compete with in LA. You're talking competition right now: Jake Funk, Xavier Jones, Raymond Callis, Javon Hawkins. And they don't start drafting this year until the 3rd round. They do not have many opportunities to bring in another running back. This might be who they're entering the season with at running back, and it could be just a mixture of Akers and Henderson. And running backs get hurt. I'm not projecting anyone to get hurt. I don't want that. But attrition happens, and he could be, again, a product of attrition, getting more touches later on down the line, and a backup who's got some pop in his step that you can get at a dirt-free price point. We're talking about at RB50 price point. Next running back, the second running back I'm going to talk about on this list, he's another backup being valued as RB41 in Dynasty ADP as of April, as of this month. 162 ADP. So he's being drafted around the 160 range, which is very cheap in drafts. And I'm going to be talking about Alexander Madison. With Dalvin Cook out of the lineup, he is averaging 20.38 PPR fantasy points per game, 79.5 rushing yards per game, and 4.5 targets per game. So he's getting used in the passing game as well. He had 3 RB1 weeks last year. At this price point, he could be your RB5 and RB6 on your dynasty team, give you a little bit of value. The risk here, though, is his contract ends this year. He could be a free agent. That could spell bad things if he goes to the wrong situation. But I don't see him being an expensive asset on the market. So there's a chance they just bring him back to continue to back up Dalvin Cook, and you'll have this handcuff for a bit. But we don't know. It is a speculative asset, but a cheap one nonetheless. RB41 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And startup drafts, you just want to see where he's at versus the wide receivers you're targeting and versus the rookie running backs. But the upside's there when he's on the field, when he gets the opportunity. Dalvin Cook is not made of steel. He's had an extensive injury history throughout his career. There's a high probability of him getting injured somewhere down the line. One, he's getting older, the injury history, it all just kind of lines up for that. You can't predict injuries, but some players it's more likely to happen with. Dalvin Cook's one of those dudes. You could have Alexander Madison as a spot starter somewhere down the line during the season, and he's a cheap get. On to the 3rd running back off this list. This running back's being drafted as the RB36 in drafts right now. He's going off the board as the 126th pick on average, around the 120 range, past the 100 mark, making him one of the cheaper running backs to get. From that standpoint, you just want to look at the wide receivers that are on the board, the tight ends at that stage of the draft, and then the rookie running backs, because they kind of go a little earlier than expected this stage of the year. But here we are talking about Chase Edmonds, running back of the Miami Dolphins. New place, new scene, new opportunity. He's a 25-year-old running back who is on a roster with another set of running backs, Raheem Mostert or Myles Gaskin. Seems a little bit ambiguous, but the Dolphins handpicked him. He's one of the first signings of the offseason of skilled players, and there's some good things in his game. When he's on the field, he was averaging 4 to 5 targets per game last year. He was 7th among running backs with 5.7 yards per touch last year. And I like this price point. He's got some juice in his step. And the fact that he's a cheaper running back that you can get in startup drafts in the market is something I want to hang my hat on, considering this whole running back landscape is going to be dropped on its head in the next year, year and a half. So instead of paying up for those other ambiguous running backs who got the bigger names, I'd rather pay down a little bit, get my RB4, RB5, RB3, or whatever, wherever I'm at in my roster construction, and get them on the cheap and then build from there, because I know the reset at running back's happening sooner than later, and I'm forecasting that into my running back value, the whole macroeconomics of things. The fourth player on this list is being drafted as the RB26, 70 overall, so the 70 range of drafts, so not super cheap, but still cheap enough for a running back considering their value is a little bit inflated in startup drafts to begin with, and it's A.J. Dillon. Aaron Rodgers is back. Aaron Jones is still there. That kind of deflates his price a little bit. That's already baked in. When Jones is off, if he gets hurt or anything, Dillon is the guy there. He's explosive. He's about a 99th percentile size-adjusted speed score, burst score, and he averaged 3.14 yards after contact per attempt. And really, we're just buying Packers here. He's a backup. He's a trendy backup. Good size adjusted athleticism, where if he gets a full workload, he can make things happen. He's a young running back in the league. Should hold a decent shelf life for you on your Dynasty team. Can you get him on trades? Probably not. Whoever has him on their roster is not willing to give him up on the cheap. The easiest way to get him right now is probably through startup drafts. I imagine his price point will be a little cheaper after the NFL draft. Once some of these rookies get pumped up in value, normally you see some of the vets drop a few spots. You might be able to get them maybe 5% cheaper in startup drafts. But if you want them now, if you're drafting now, at 70 overall, it's not a bad price point for A.J. Dillon. The fifth running back I'm going to be talking about today, RB22. Being drafted around 56 overall, the 55 area of the draft. He's a back-end RB2, but can give you RB1-ish production. I'm talking about David Montgomery. He's an older speculative asset in the Dynasty fantasy football game. He'll soon be 25 years old, and he's still being valued as a back-end RB2. Injuries have been there. Bears offense has been there. Last year, averaged 21 touches per game. On the low, it was 14. On the high, it was 30. Be a free agent next year, so that's going to be very impactful. He's a risky long-term Dynasty asset. But again, when we look at things from a macro standpoint, and when you're investing in running backs, do you want to pay up for a risky long-term asset, or do you want to pay a little down for a risky long-term asset? He can give you 80 to 90% of what some of those top-tier guys give you when healthy. And I'm talking about the older ones. The younger ones, you're not thinking of that, but the older top-tier running backs. And you want to think of that. The running back landscape is very risky. You may want to pay down a little bit. Get a guy like Montgomery. Also, when you're drafting him, or you're thinking about drafting him, look at the wide receivers. In this area of the draft, you still got some good wide receivers on the board, and then the rookie running backs. There's going to be a few of them in that area that you may want instead of him. And then you may want to pay down even more further from him. But if you want a guy who, when healthy, is on the field getting a lot of touches and you don't want to pay a premium price for, David Montgomery is a guy you may want to take a look at because he's going out of value considering his touch rates, considering his potential output for fantasy football. But those are 5 guys that you can look at to buying, getting, or doing whatever with in Dynasty Fantasy Football. According to ADP, they're being drafted a little bit on the low. I believe when it comes to running backs, it's always good to look for what can you get at a value, who can help your team at the best cost. And I feel like this running back class, I know this running back class here that we have, this pool of running backs, is going to flip on its head in the next year, year and a half or so, sooner than what we want to think. And it's going to reset. I want to be insulated to that. I want to have those cheaper assets that can still help me in the now. And when that reset happens, I'm not near as devastated as if I were if I paid up for one of those older running backs who are getting drafted just a few rounds higher. I can just go a few rounds lower or start getting some of those back end guys. So when the older running backs get injured for a few games, I got them to plug in. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find values for you guys, trying to look at things from different angles to help you out for your dynasty teams. Let me know what you think in the comments. Who are you actually trying to buy? Who are you trying to get off the market in your leagues? Let me know. Let everybody else know. Thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button on the way out. Every subscription matters. Fuels me to keep pumping out this content. Fuels me to keep helping you guys and everything else. Again, I want to thank you, and I'll catch you next time.